backlash, particularly the Muslims. I've done stories about the situation of the air industry. I just was speaking yesterday with my travel agent, and he was telling me that it's going to be dreadful for his business, and at least a 10% loss of revenue. And since these things are going to continue for a long while.
Well, let me ask you this. The people of Spain obviously know, as the people in the United States know, that retaliation is coming. What will people say?
People are thinking, I assume that people are thinking from what we all are reporting and from everything that we are listening and learning, that is going to be a very difficult task to deal with this situation. This is not a conventional war. This is a different kind of enemy. You are not going to have a clear-cut relation with the other side, and even you don't even know who the other people are and how are you going to deal with them. And are states supporting these very subtle networks of terrorist groups? What kind of states? Some of the states are that are recognizing the Taliban are particularly states that are very close allies of the United States.
All right, we have to stop there. Thank you. Good luck in your reporting. We want to show you one of the images here quickly as we go. Flags obviously flying at half-staff. Digital flags wave very proudly over Times Square here. Paula?
And Martin, I know you've gone through the newspapers this morning. I don't have one I can actually, you know what, if someone can, well, I'll do it later. In many of the newspapers across the country, there are foldouts with printed American flags where they're being asked, there, right there at the bottom there. Here we go. This one out of the New York Times that is asking people to place this in their windows and in their place of employment. To show their strong sense of resolve. We broke into a conversation that the mayor of the city of New York, Rudy Giuliani, was holding with the mayor of Jerusalem, Ehud Olmert, and we had to go away from that because Donald Rumsfeld held his news briefing. But we thought it was important enough for you to hear to get back to. So let's re-listen to part of that conversation that took place earlier today.
All of the people of New York City appreciate greatly the support that we have in our sister city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a city that's even older by a lot than New York. It's a city that we feel tremendous affection for and attachment to. It's the site of the three great religions of the world, or the three great religions that have affected Western civilization. And we feel tremendous bond with the people of Jerusalem. And I particularly feel a very close personal bond with Ehud, with Mayor Olmert, having been to Jerusalem during a period of time where you went through and are still going through things like we're experiencing today. And I remember riding the bus with you, Ehud, when the people of your city were shocked and frightened and upset and overcame it. And I remember coming back from my trip to Jerusalem absolutely amazed at the spirit of the people of Israel, how they could live through these kinds of terrorist attacks, go about their normal way of life, and show no fear, even though the terrorists were attempting to make them fearful. So we are so proud that you're naming a street after the city of New York. We feel now that we're just totally united with the people of Jerusalem. We experienced what they experienced, and hopefully we're going to have the same courage and the same determination and the same ability to preserve freedom that you've shown for so long.
All right, once again, we have to interrupt the mayor. You can hear the other side of the conversation with the mayor of Jerusalem to bring you this statement by Secretary of State Colin Powell.
He's been very, very supportive. He indicated support to me directly, and then he spoke to President Bush yesterday. They had a good conversation, and he pledged his support. And I expect in the next several days we will be sending an interagency team to Pakistan to get into greater details about what our campaign plans might be like and what kind of support might be needed. But it's a little early to get more specific than that. But the Pakistanis have been very forthcoming, and I think we should stop saying, can we trust them, can't we trust them? We will see what they are going to be able to do. And yes, I trust them. They've been very forthcoming, and we should can compliment them on that forthcomingness rather than start speculating about their sincerity.
Mr. Secretary, is there any urgency, sir, to solve the Israeli-Palestinian problems as part of the global strategy?
There is always an urgency to solving the Israeli-Palestinian problem. And I have spent a good part of my time this week in the midst of our own crisis talking to leaders in the region, Prime Minister Sharon, Foreign Minister Perez, and Chairman Arafat, in an effort to see progress, to get a meeting started, or at least one meeting going, so that we can see some progress in this time of crisis. But so far that has not come about, but we still have hope, and I'm still encouraging all parties to find a way to meet and begin a dialogue that will result in a ceasefire, and we can get started with the Mitchell Plan. It still remains our goal.
Mr. Secretary,
One more, then I have to go.
America's NATO allies. This is an extension of military support.
I'm very pleased with what NATO has done with the invocation of Article 5 of the Washington Treaty, which says an attack from outside the alliance and any member of the alliance, the whole alliance will respond. And in the days ahead, I'll be having more in-depth discussions with my NATO colleagues as we structure our response and see how NATO members can participate in that response in one way or the other. Don't always think of it in terms of just military terms, but there are a lot of other things we can do with respect to the pressure that we can put on countries that harbor or provide a haven for terrorists. And so we'll be looking to work with NATO and all of our European, Asian, African, South American allies throughout the world to deal with a crisis that has been directed against the civilized world. Let me also say that while America is in a state of grief over the losses we suffered, some 40 countries lost people in the World Trade Center. And some of those numbers are not trivial, hundreds lost from other countries. And so our hearts go out to all of those countries that lost citizens, and that's why this is an international matter and not just solely an American matter. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary.
All right, one of the more interesting things to come out of that short appearance by the Secretary of State is that he reiterated his support for Pakistan. Obviously, Pakistan has pledged cooperation. In exchange for its cooperation, it wants the U.S. to retire some $30 million worth of debt. $30 billion worth of debt. In addition to that, it wants the United States to somehow get involved with the dispute between Kashmir and India and Pakistan. He also touched upon problems in the Middle East, saying he has encouraged all parties to talk and hopes that perhaps a ceasefire could be accomplished. Now, on that note, at the time when the Secretary of State was speaking, for the second time, we were trying to share with you part of the conversation that Mayor Giuliani was having with the mayor of Jerusalem, Ehud Olmert. The mayor of New York is not a man who is given to much emotion in public. What you did not see was his reaction when the mayor of Jerusalem told him that the citizens of Israel are going to rename Jaffa Street, which is the street where so much bloodshed has happened, Jaffa Street, to New York Street. Once again, it would take a third attempt to show you that strain of the conversation, but the mayor of New York incredibly moved by that gesture this morning. When we talk about Israel, there's actually one other note I can add to you. Sources are telling CNN that in addition to what Pakistan has conveyed that it wants from Washington, he does not want Israel, or it does not want Israel or any kind of Indian participation in any military operation around or close to its borders. All right, let's check back in with Bill Hemmer, who joins us from as close as you can get to Ground Zero this morning. What's going on there right now, Bill?
Paula, good morning once again. Just to follow up on that, anyone who's been to the Middle East and specifically Jerusalem knows how significant that move is for the renaming of that street there. Paula, it is Sunday. Normally, on a typical Sunday in the fall, especially in September, tens of thousands of Americans We'll be getting ready for the NFL. Week 2 was supposed to be played today. That has been canceled. We haven't seen baseball played since last Monday of this past week. And Frank DeFord, a senior contributing writer for Sports Illustrated, with us now live in Connecticut this morning. And Frank, it seems somewhat incongruous for me to talk about baseball and football here about 2 blocks from the World Trade Center, but interesting to get your perspective. The American way of life, what we're seeing with the cancellation of sports put on hold right now to recognize this national and somewhat international tragedy.
Bill, I think it would have been good if we'd played, if we'd gone back to the kind of normality that the president has suggested. It's interesting that we were just talking about Israel and naming the new street in Jerusalem after New York. And when the Israeli athletes at Munich were killed, Israel wanted the games to go on very desperately. I spoke with many of the members of the families of those murdered athletes, and to a person, as bereaved as they were, the one thing they were glad of is that the games went on so that the terrorists did not have that additional feather in their cap. I think it's very important for us to come together at this time, and there is no better place for the public to come together in America, public of all types, all different sorts of people, than at a baseball or a football game, and we missed that opportunity today.
Frank, I'm curious to know how you strike the proper balance toward giving attention to what some consider normal way of life and also considering what we saw on Tuesday of this week in this city.
Well, Bill, of course, that's the trick, to walk that fine line. But you know, we're human. We're full of all kinds of contradictory emotions. At the same time that we have grief now, we also have a lot of anger. It's impossible to grieve for 24 hours a day. And so the opportunity to come together, to join together, is in a way sort of very therapeutic. It doesn't mean that we're callous. It doesn't mean that we're not caring. It gives us, on the contrary, an opportunity to stand together, to be, in a sense, a kind of an American flag made up of ourselves. And that's the only place that can really take place is at a stadium. It's a very consoling opportunity.
Frank, so many times that you and like us were paid to put our own words to significant events, but I find it very difficult to find the right words in a case like this. When you sit down and put pen to paper, what will you be writing about?
Well, I have written that particularly since I am a sports writer, and I should more or less confine myself to that we must remember that we are a large nation. We're full of so many diverse types. And as we mourn in different ways, as we worship in different ways, so do we celebrate in different ways. And the opportunity to celebrate should be there. I think it's unfortunate that those who wanted to go to games to take a respite from this terrible, terrible grief were denied that opportunity. I'm glad that the games will be back tomorrow, and I think that will be good for America and help us on our way.
And quickly, Frank, other than moments of silence and the Star-Spangled Banner, which we can all anticipate at this point, what's the proper way to address this, whether you're playing a baseball game in Cincinnati or San Francisco or football games next week?
Well, I do think it's proper to do what you did. If, for example, you play golf on Sundays, I think it's wise to get out there. If you go to church, to go to church and pray perhaps a little more, to be with your family. If you just walk in the woods, then walk in the woods. Do whatever it is that you do to regain that equilibrium in your life.
Frank DeFord from Connecticut. Thanks for sharing your thoughts this morning, Frank. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Bill.
All right, Paula, we have seen quite a bit of activity down here in the past hour and a half. We'll talk more about that in the rescue operation that continues, again, 2 blocks from our location here on the south end of Manhattan. Paula?
And Bill, at a time when Frank DeFord described the necessity for Americans to try to get back to as normal as possible of life, the cold, hard reality is that there are thousands of people who have come to New York City, those that lived here, those that were forced to get here, mostly by car, are looking for their loved ones. And right now, Candy Crowley has a piece on a father's desperate search for his missing daughter.
Yes, Dan? Yes, this is David Vincent.
He's an Eastman Kodak executive from Webster, New York. A man with a problem to solve, a man on a mission.
How is it being set up so that I can make the best use of my time? Because you're working a timeline here. You have to get to your daughter as fast as you can.
Melissa is missing. She's a technology recruiter at Alliance Consulting.
But we know that's 102nd floor of Tower 1.
The enormity of what's happened in David Vinson's life shows on his face, but does not slow his